Chapter 12. Once, a dentist stopped me from asking a Nazi officer about my parents, and I was really mad at him. I still am, even after a sleep and a long sit on the bucket. I want to break this stupid toothbrush he made for me into tiny pieces. That's why I'm scrubbing my teeth so hard. The Nazi officer was smiling by the time I was halfway through the story. By the time I described how the two German soldiers turned the windmill into a giant water pump and built a lake for the African kids to go ice skating on, he was laughing. He made me carry on with the story even after Barney finished drilling. At the end, the Nazi officer asked me to write the story down so he could send it home to his kids. Of course I said yes. I told him it would be in Polish and it would take me a couple of days. The Nazi officer didn't mind at all. He just asked me to drop it off when it was finished. I don't think he's a friend of the other Nazi officer, the murderer. I think when he hears about what's happened to Mum and Dad, he'll want to help them. But before I could start telling him, Barney grabbed me and the bag of food and we left. Too dangerous, Barney told me in the street. But why? But he wouldn't say why. This toothbrush is unbreakable. It's only wood and bristles, but Barney must have some dentist's secret of making it really strong. Felix, says a muffled voice. I look down. Zelda has joined me at the teeth cleaning bowl. Her mouth is already foaming with Barney's toothpaste that he makes from chalk dust and soap. When you were out with Barney last night, she says, did you find our parents? I don't know what to say. Her eyes shining hopefully above the foam, and suddenly I feel terrible. Here's me moaning about waiting 2 days to have a conversation with a Nazi officer, and poor Zelda still doesn't even know her parents are dead. Her face falls. You didn't find them, she says. I shake my head. We look at each other. I try to think up a story about how parents aren't really that important, but I can't, because they are. I know a place where we can see them from, says Zelda. I smile sadly. At least she's learning how to use her imagination. Up there, she says. I look up to where she's pointing, a needle of daylight, bigger than the others. It's coming in through a crack where one of the walls meets the ceiling. Jacob says that from up here he can see outside into the street, says Zelda. I sigh. Everyone's a storyteller these days. It's true, says a voice behind me. Jacob is climbing off his sack bed, blinking very indignantly. Several of the other kids are waking up too. It's easy, says Jacob. You make a pile of beds and climb up. I did it last night. He did, says Zelda, but he wouldn't let me. I look at them both. I can see that they're telling the truth. When people lie, their toothpaste foam droops. Let's do it now, says Zelda excitedly. I peer over at the other side of the cellar. Barney is still in bed, snoring. When he's been out at night, he usually sleeps pretty late. All right, I say. It's worth a try, and not just for me. It might be good for Zelda too. She might see an auntie or an uncle or something. I can't see my mummy and daddy yet, says Zelda. Can you see yours? Not yet, I say. I get a firmer grip with my bare feet on the wobbly pile of beds. Hold Zelda's arm tighter so we don't both fall. Press my glasses harder against the crack in the wall to try to see something that isn't feet and legs. That's the problem with looking out into the street at ground level. You don't get to see the tops of people. It's very confusing. I can see hundreds of feet and legs milling around out there. With this many Jewish people in Poland, how come Mum and Dad's shop didn't do better? I can see my mummy's feet, yells Zelda over here in her brown shoes. Shh, calls Chaya from down below. You'll wake Barney. It's all right, says Jacob, his voice strained from helping Chaya prop up the pile of beds. Barney's a heavy sleeper. Zelda's eyes are pressed to the crack in the wall. Over there, she squeaks. Mummy's feet. I know how she feels. I thought I saw Dad's dark green trousers until I saw another pair, and then 3 more. I try to see if any of the feet and legs look as if they're doing the sort of things Mum and Dad would do, like carrying a big pile of books or having discussions about books, or reading somebody else's book over their shoulder. I can't tell. The feet and legs could be doing anything. I can identify those two pair of legs over there. They belong to two men who were wrestling on the ground over a piece of bread. And those there belong to another man who just collapsed and is lying on the cobbles while people step over him. But the rest of the feet and legs could belong to anybody. The only thing I can tell for sure is that none of them belong to kids. I press my nose to the crack in the wall and try to get a whiff of Mum's perfume. Nothing. I cram my ear to the crack to try to hear Mum and Dad's voices. All I can hear is trucks arriving and people yelling. Some of them sound like German soldiers. Suddenly, all the feet and legs are scattering and running away. "Mummy!" yells Zelda. She's jiggling up and down. The pile of beds underneath us is toppling. "Look out!" yells Jacob. I plummet toward the floor. Luckily, the beds break my fall, and so does Jacob. When my head stops spinning and I find my glasses, I help him out from under a sack and almost step back into Barney, who is standing there, hands on hips, glaring at us. I can't give him my full attention yet, not until I've made sure Zelda is all right. If she landed on this stone floor, phew, there she is, crawling around on her hands and knees. "Where are my slippers?" she's saying. "I need to put my slippers on so I can go see Mummy." I look at how desperately she's searching, and suddenly I know I have to tell her. I don't want to, and I don't know how to, but I have to. The poor kid can't go on like this. She needs to know the truth. "You're sure they were both dead?" says Barney quietly as we watch the other kids put the beds into position and Zelda put her slippers on. I nod. I tell him about the feathers I held under their noses. They'd been shot, I say. So had the chickens. I try not to think about the blood. Barney frowns. "You're right," he says. "Zelda needs to know." I wait, but he doesn't say anything else. "Will you tell her?" I say. Barney frowns some more. "I think it's better if you do it," he says. "You've been through a lot together and she trusts you, and you were there." That's what I've been dreading," he'd say. "I don't know how to," I say quietly. Barney looks at me. I haven't noticed before how red his eyes are. Must be because he works at night a lot. "Just tell her the story of what you saw," he says. "You don't have to make anything up." "All right," I say. I wish I could make things up for Zelda. I wish I could tell her a happy story. But how my glasses were affected by the heat of the fire, and how her parents aren't really dead, and how they're having a holiday on a desert island with a cake shop, and how they'll be coming back for her as soon as their suntans are completed. But I can't. I tell Zelda the story of what I saw. She doesn't believe me. "No!" she yells, throwing herself onto her sack. Barney puts his hand gently on her shoulder. The other kids watch silently, their faces sad. I tell her again, still without making anything up. This time she doesn't yell. For a long time her body shakes in Barney's arms without any sound at all. I'm trembling myself, partly at the memory of what I saw, and partly because for Zelda, my story has made her parents dead. Now several other kids are crying too. Ruth stops brushing her hair and lets tears run down her face. "Once," she whispers, "some goblins hit my dad with sticks. They hit him with sticks until he died." Barney reaches over and squeezes her hand. Jacob is sobbing too. "Nana was burnt," he says, tears trickling through his blinks. "I got home from school and they were all burnt. Nana and Poppy and Ellie and Marta and Oleg." Heinrich stands up and kicks his bed. "I hate goblins," he says. "They killed Siggy and cut off his tail." Chaya puts her good arm around him and holds him while he sobs. She lowers her gentle face and speaks quietly. "Once a princess lived in a castle. It was a small castle, but the princess loved it, and she loved her family who lived there with her. Then, one day, the evil goblins came looking for information about their enemies. They thought the princess knew the information, but she didn't. To make her tell, the goblins gave the princess 3 wishes. Either they could hurt her, or they could hurt the old people, or they could hurt the babies. Chaya pauses, trembling, staring at the floor. I can see how hard it is for her to finish the story. The princess chose the first wish, she says quietly, but because she didn't know any information, the goblins made all 3 wishes come true. We're all crying now. Moshe is still chewing his wood, but tears are running down his face too. A whole cellar full of tears. I take Chaya's hand for a while. Then I go over and Barney lets me hug Zelda. I feel the sadness shaking her whole body. All around me, poor kids are crying for their dead families. My tears are different. I feel so lucky because somewhere out there, I know my mum and dad are still alive.